Child labor is making a comeback across the U.S. But could it be good for Americans? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Child labor is on the rise across the United States, and it's stirring up some major controversy, with some calling it chilling or sickening, which makes sense. When people think of child labor, they usually think of this, or they think of how things were in the U.S. a century ago, when it was common for children to work in factories, cotton mills, and mines. Yes, there were miners. Things were quite different back then. Kids used to look way cooler. And when you think about it, the most popular video game in the world by sales volume is Minecraft. Kids yearn for the mines. But so yes, when people think of child labor, they think of exploitation. You don't think of teens working at the drive-thru window, or doing checkout at the local supermarket, or protecting other children from drowning at the local pool. But technically, that's child labor too, since the terms minor and child are often used interchangeably. So which kind of child labor is on the rise? It's kind of a gray area. Most people probably aren't necessarily against the idea of teens doing some sort of part-time job to earn money, learn responsibility, and gain experience. Many in the U.S., however, aren't comfortable with children of any age doing strenuous or hazardous work. And that's where the controversy lies. Over the past 2 years, at least 14 states have introduced revised laws on child labor. For example, Minnesota has introduced a bill that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work in construction or building projects. The proposals getting the most attention are coming from Arkansas and Iowa, marking the first time in over a century that Arkansas and Iowa got any attention. Earlier this year, Arkansas signed into law the Youth Hiring Act. It eliminates the requirement that children aged 14 and 15 obtain permission from the state's Division of Labor to be employed. It also does away with the requirement to obtain an employment certificate and age verification through it. Even parent or guardian consent isn't required anymore, because conservative states are never pushing for more parental rights. I mean, when has that been a hot-button issue they've rallied around constantly over the past year? Some are calling the Arkansas law a travesty. Many consider Iowa a travesty as well, in general, but also for their changes to child labor laws. Iowa now allows those as young as 14 to work in industrial laundries. At age 16, they can take jobs in roofing, constructions, excavation, and demolition, and can operate power-driven machinery as well as freezers at meatpacking plants. It's even looking into giving 14-year-olds special driver's licenses for work programs. Because when I'm in traffic, I'm always thinking, if only there were even more people on the road right now distracted watching TikTok videos. The most controversial part was when the Iowa bill included a clause saying that businesses aren't liable for injuries or illnesses on the job unless students prove that they resulted from following orders. And then there's the alcohol question. Wisconsin aims to allow 14-year-olds to serve alcohol. Although considering this is Wisconsin, the average 14-year-old already has been drinking for at least 8 years. Rolling down the slide on the playground, sipping on gin and juicy juice. The funny thing is, this law would help 14-year-olds to have their mind on their money and their money on their mind. Now, to be clear, the bill proposal says that teens as young as 14 would only serve seated customers, not drinkers who are at the bar itself. If it passed, this would give Wisconsin the lowest age limit for workers allowed to serve alcohol nationwide. But Wisconsin isn't alone. Since 2021, at least 9 states have introduced bills to lower the age at which young workers can serve alcohol. 7 have enacted them. There's even a bill in the United States Congress that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds to work in certain mechanized logging operations with parental supervision. So are all these policies as dangerous as they sound? I'll tell you after the break. Welcome back. So child safety advocates are outraged with the push to get more minors employed. The Washington Post calls these moves disgraceful and short-sighted. And given that the recent laws and proposals have largely been introduced by Republicans, some are accusing Republicans and conservatives of attacking U.S. child labor laws and going on a campaign to rewrite child labor laws. To be fair, though, even some Democrats are on board with these policy changes. The predominantly Democratic state of New Jersey, for example, enacted a bill allowing teenagers 16 and older to work up to 50 hours a week, up from 40 during summer break, with parental approval. Ohio Democrats likewise agreed to allow teens as young as 14 to work later in the day, 9 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. I'd imagine many parents would be in favor of this. You mean I can get my moody teen out of the house for another few hours? Where do I sign? Critics claim that loosening child labor laws just makes it easier to put children at risk. After all, children are already being hurt when existing laws are broken. For example, one McDonald's franchise made 10-year-olds work as late as 2 a.m. with deep fryers. And 2 more McDonald's franchises were fined for child labor violations in Louisiana and Texas. Come on, McDonald's, what is this? And then there was the time one of the nation's largest food sanitation companies was fined $1.5 million for hiring children to clean meatpacking plants, full of sharp equipment and hazardous chemicals. This is the most dangerous factory setting for children I've seen since Willy Wonka. Some of these kids even die. Earlier last month, a 16-year-old boy got crushed in a Mississippi poultry plant, and another got crushed in a sawmill while doing legal work. You know, it's probably a good time for a mental health break. Oh, look, puppies. Oh no, even underage dogs are being put to work. According to former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, America seems to be lurching backward to the Gilded Age of the late 19th century, when workers, including young children, were treated like cow dung and robber barons ruled the roost. And the culprit? Cruel capitalism.
Across America, we're witnessing a resurgence of cruel capitalism, in which business lobbyists and lawmakers justify their actions by arguing that they're not exploiting the weak and vulnerable, but rather providing jobs for those who need them and would otherwise go hungry or homeless.
That's right, this is a product of cruel capitalism. Critics also argue that loosening child labor laws will make exploitation of illegal migrant children easier and more widespread. Migrant child labor is already a huge problem, thanks in part to the Biden administration's border policies. I've covered this in a previous episode. If you want to learn more about that, I'll leave a link below. But now, while the employment of undocumented migrant children is legitimately a huge problem that does lead to exploitation, many argue that it's unfair to lump it together with minors doing legitimate legal work, even for work that may be a bit more hands-on. Side note, this construction worker probably has the most awkward cat calls of all time. Hey, pretty mama, what's your Xbox gamer tag? Some say that the pros for loosening child labor laws far outweigh the cons. But is that the case? I'll get to that after the break. Welcome back. You know the problem with kids these days? Today's teenagers spend too much time on social media and too little growing up, which is why anything reasonable that a state can do to make it easier for them to work is welcome. Given how people are pouring thousands of dollars into NPC TikToks, I could see why people are saying, please, just get these people out into the real world. I never thought I'd say this, but I might prefer it if this kid got a job in a mine. By loosening child labor laws, proponents argue that they're simply getting rid of obsolete and arbitrary restrictions that get in the way of what both children and parents want, for kids to get a frickin' job already. They also argue that there are still plenty of protections in place. In Arkansas, for example, some believe that doing away with getting permission from the state's Division of Labor completely eliminates age verification and parents from the process. But it's not as if employers can't figure out the age of their employees through their Social Security information or W-9 tax form. It would also be hard for parents not to be aware that their children are working, given that they live in the same house. I thought it felt more peaceful in here lately. As for Iowa's controversial child labor bill, the current version of its child labor bill no longer exempts businesses from civil liability if a student is sickened, injured, or killed due to either the student or the company's negligence, though it does give freedom of civil liability if a student gets injured commuting to and from work while not on the job. Well, thank goodness. I'd be heartbroken if there weren't more drivers distracted by TikTok videos. The law still maintains a lot of restrictions on what children can do. People who want children to have the flexibility to work more at younger ages say that getting teens into jobs early help them succeed later in life, even if the jobs are a bit riskier. After all, studies show that early work experience have long-lasting career benefits. Many people also believe that making work accessible to more kids will help reduce drug use and crime, or something even worse, becoming NPC bots.
Ice cream's so good.
I never thought I'd say this, but I might prefer it if they chose a life of drugs and crime. Proponents also argue that having these kinds of jobs will give teens a greater sense of responsibility and good habits that will help them in adulthood. The UN notes For every young person, a job offering decent work is an important step in completing the transition to adulthood, a milestone towards independence and self-reliance. A better transition than what they did with kids in the old days: send them to the woods alone and kill a wolf. Happy 12th birthday. People with this line of thinking also argue that loosening child labor laws puts an end to trapping people in poverty, welfare, and government dependency. Yeah, because as we all know, workers are never broke and require government assistance. Back in 2014, the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, made a similar argument, saying children work because their families are desperately poor, and the meager addition to the family income they can contribute is often necessary for survival. Which is all well and good, but that could lead to another problem. Kids are working partly because they're trying to save up for college, which is becoming an ever more expensive debt trap. Would the extra income families get from kids earning more money spur even higher tuition rates? It's not just higher education. Could there be a wage price spiral where increased income in turn increases demand for goods, which in turn increases prices and demands even more income? When women entered the workplace in a big way, it wasn't long before a second income went from being extra money to being required for survival. We'll get to the point where a family needs 3 incomes for survival? I shudder to think of the extra hours people will commit to doing even more NPC TikToks for money. So what do you think about child labor? What should be allowed? Leave your comments below. And remember that we rely mainly on direct support from viewers like you. If you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, all it takes is as little as $1 per episode over on our crowdfunding website, Patreon. Visit patreon.com/America Uncovered for more. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.